Dear Evan Hansen, the movie, is a tragic disaster. I'm David Chen. Let's talk about it. Before we get started, I will be discussing the main plot details of this movie, so minor spoilers, and those plot details do involve some discussion of suicide, so just wanted to let you all know. I want to begin by saying I'm a huge fan of musicals. When I was in middle school and high school, I participated in many musicals. I played pit orchestra in some musicals. As an adult, I've gone to see musicals many times live, and I just enjoy the format a lot. Many people can reasonably find musicals to be cheesy or corny. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why it shouldn't work. You have people just singing their emotions, everyone breaking out in song, but there's a weird alchemy that occurs, because no matter what the musical is, often when you have the people, the lights, the choreography, the singing, people in a theater watching live, there's some magic that happens there that is difficult to describe or replicate. It just kind of works as a thing that you can enjoy and watch and feel good about. And often, it doesn't even matter what the topic is. I recently watched a musical called Come From Away on Apple TV+, and it's about the aftermath of 9/11. That does not sound like something that would be interesting or enjoyable to watch, but the musical made it work. But problems can occur when you're trying to translate a story from one format to the other. From musical format to the screen. There's different rules for these mediums. There's different conventions that people are familiar with and that they expect. And when you are unable to walk that line correctly, the results can be really catastrophic. And I think that's what's happened here. Dear Evan Hansen does not work as a movie, nor does it work as a movie musical. It's marred by a story that is deeply upsetting and that does not seem to have any coherent or admirable message to put out about mental health. And the musical numbers are inert. They are not staged or shot in a way that is particularly interesting. There are so many terrible decisions along the way, and at any point, the filmmakers and the producers could have made a different decision, but they didn't. And it's not necessarily because they're stupid, it's just because creative work is not an exact science. And so you think something's going to work, and then when you make the decision, you realize it doesn't work, but you're already too far down the path. And they made so many of these bad decisions that the end result is this movie. Let's talk about the plot real quick. Dear Evan Hansen tells the story of Evan Hansen, a high school student played by Ben Platt, who writes letters to himself, Dear Evan Hansen, because it's an exercise his therapist told him to do to encourage himself to see a better version of himself, a better version of the day that he's about to live through. One day, a student at his high school, Connor, who is deeply troubled, finds one of Evan's letters and thinks that Evan is taunting him because Evan has written about Connor's sister, who he's kind of into. And so Connor takes the letter, and then we later find out that Connor has taken his own life. When his parents find the letter on Connor's body, although the circumstances are never really disclosed, they think that Evan Hansen is one of Connor's friends. And they didn't think Connor had any friends, so this is a big deal. And since Evan Hansen is a normal person who doesn't want to exacerbate the pain of these parents, he decides to go along with the lie. Not only that, he fabricates further in order to make it seem like he and Connor are best friends. They make up correspondence between the two of them. And at a memorial service, he delivers a speech in the form of a musical number that goes viral, which results in them wanting to create a memorial for Connor and so on and so forth. It's about this series of lies that escalates.
I started talking and you couldn't stop. They didn't want me to stop.
I want to talk about three things that sink Dear Evan Hansen in the movie. And the first thing is Ben Platt's appearance. I know people have been talking about this already a lot online. The problem is Ben Platt was 26 years old when he played Evan Hansen in this movie. He was a little bit younger when he played him in the stage version of the show. And the way the movie approaches this is by slathering all this makeup and prosthetics on his face, having him have this like really curly hair, and he's hunched over and has all these extreme tics. It just is never convincing. At no point during this entire film do you believe you are looking at a high school boy. Now, why is that important? It's because the decisions that Evan Hansen makes are so terrible and monstrous in this movie. He is doing one of the worst things you can do to someone else, which is he's gaslighting this family, he's lying to this family, he's distorting the memory of their son, and then taking that lie and using it to his social benefit for the rest of the world. The only way you could possibly forgive something like this, the only way you can possibly understand something like this, the only way you could possibly root for Evan Hansen to find his way out of this, is if you believe He is so young and naive that he's just going along with the flow and doing this stuff because he doesn't understand the world enough to know another path forward. But if you think it's a 26-year-old dude doing this, he instantly becomes a monster. He instantly becomes a predator. And that's the overtone of this whole movie is this guy, Evan Hansen, played by Ben Platt, looks like he is preying upon all those around him in a really cruel and calculated fashion. There were ways to potentially make a 26-year-old Ben Platt work in this film, but this movie decides to not take any of them. So here's an example. Like, if Ben Platt was playing Evan Hansen on stage today, it might even still work, because when you're watching someone in a musical, you're seeing them on stage like 30, 80 feet away, right? Like they're like a speck. And so you can't necessarily see their face. And so someone could easily be made up to look like a high school student from there. But the movie shoots almost all of its musical numbers in extreme close-up. So you are sitting there looking at Ben Platt's face, studying every crevice that they papered over with this makeup that, again, at no point looks convincing. It almost feels like it's sabotage. Like, it almost feels like the filmmakers were like, we're going to take Ben Platt down a notch by putting him in all this makeup and then shooting him ultra up close and lighting him with these like blaring fluorescent lights for most of the movie. I mean, they could have done it in a way that wasn't so obviously bad, but they decided to take every bad decision to make Ben Platt look awful. If you wanted to make a movie whose intention was to make Ben Platt look like a lanky, lumbering grotesquerie, I don't know if you would have made a different movie than Dear Evan Hansen, right? Like, it almost feels like intentionally, like the takedown of Ben Platt wouldn't have been worse than just what this movie is. It's that bad. Now, again, I think Ben Platt is super talented, and I feel bad for him a little bit because I think people are making fun of him a lot for this. And honestly, the whole system failed this movie. You know, it wasn't just Ben Platt. It was the decision to greenlight it with Ben Platt. It was a decision to shoot it like this. But it doesn't work, and it's bad, and we have to just talk about it a little bit. So that's the first thing. Let's talk about the second thing, which is the musical numbers. I've already talked a little bit about how the musical numbers look and how they are completely inert. When you're watching musical numbers on a Broadway stage, you kind of accept that there's this heightened reality that they're creating. Every time people start singing, it's like, oh, everyone's kind of understanding that we're in this alternate reality where people sing and dance all the time. When you translate this to movies, there's different ways you can approach it. One way is whenever the people are singing and dancing, they're part of this alternate reality. Like, I would say Chicago, you know, whenever they did some of the singing and dancing in that movie, it's like, oh, they're not even in the same physical location anymore. They're just doing a whole different thing. Or in a case like La La Land, where the singing and dancing is like in universe and everyone around starts singing and dancing and they all kind of just accept that they're part of this reality. Dear Evan Hansen, the movie, makes an extremely bizarre decision, which is, for the most part, whenever someone is singing, they are the only person in the musical. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, no one else is in the musical. It's just that person. Now, sometimes songs will have like multiple singers, and of course they're all in the musical. But like, there's songs, multiple songs, where Evan Hansen is singing, and there's like, he's singing to Connor's family. And none of them are in the musical. It's just him singing. And so much of the movie, so many of these musical numbers is just one character or a couple characters singing at another character. Like, that's the entire concept of the musical numbers, is just one person standing there, walking around a little bit, singing. There's none of the creativity and staging that you'd get with a Broadway musical number. And as a result, it just feels so anemic and lifeless, the entire movie. And to the extent that this movie could have worked, it really needs to like kind of get you into this zone where you kind of are experiencing the heightened emotions. But the way this movie decides to play it is making all the musical numbers basically ultra realistic. So the person singing is doing some singing, and you don't even know like what the other characters are perceiving in that time. Like, is he talking? Is he singing? But everyone else is just playing it straight. Like, this is completely normal. This is an ultra realistic setting. It's not heightened at all. And I think this makes the movie feel extremely discordant as a result. Like, it just feels so weird to have like one person in the musical and everyone else is just looking at him deadpan the entire time. So that's the second thing, which is like the tone of the musical feels very off and off-putting. Let's talk about the final thing, the story. I'm going to have to talk a little bit more about the plot of the movie. Again, I'm going to be very careful about spoilers, but there are going to be some minor spoilers. So if you don't want to hear them, then you should watch the movie or don't. Come back, finish this video. It's extremely problematic from a mental health perspective. The character of Connor commits suicide relatively early on in the film, and then the movie goes on to show Evan Hansen lying about Connor, and those lies bringing his family together, bringing his community together, unifying people, remembering Connor in a positive way that they never did before, creating a foundation for Connor. And I could honestly see this being interpreted as like, hey, maybe taking your own life might lead to some positive things. Now, that's not quite where it ends up, but for much of the movie, you do see people experiencing the positive effects of Connor's suicide, and you don't really see them experiencing that many negative effects. Yes, there are some songs and there is some anguish, but most of the movie is devoted to how Evan Hansen's lies bring people together. And I think that is a deeply troubling, not necessarily message, I don't think that's what the message of the film is, but it's a troubling thing to portray, even if there is some kind of reckoning to the end. What's so ridiculous about this movie and the advertising for it is that every time you see in the trailer people having a heartfelt moment, it's because Evan has lied to them. Just look at the trailer. All these people coming together, it's because Evan's lied. This moment, it's because of Evan's lies. This interaction, it's because of Evan's lies. So the movie is trying to sell itself as like this feel-good thing, but it's because Evan has lied to them in the most damaging and hurtful and horrifying way imaginable. And it just is ultimately a very mixed message this movie's trying to say, because it's one thing if the movie reckoned with those lies in any interesting way, if Evan took responsibility for them in a way that was impactful, but that doesn't really happen. It doesn't happen in the musical, and in this movie, they deal with it over the course of like 10 minutes at the end, and it's very, very unsatisfying. The movie's message about who you should be, what you should try to do in the wake of a tragedy like this is at best mixed and muddled, and at worst damaging and exploitative. So those are what I think are the three biggest issues with Dear Evan Hansen, the movie. At the end of the day, what are we left with here? Well, I haven't mentioned a couple of the good things about the movie. And one of the best things about the movie is the cast. You have Julianne Moore, you have Amy Adams, you got Caitlin Dever, and even to some extent Ben Platt. All these people are doing great work. They are trying valiantly to salvage this material. But the script, the story, it just isn't there. It's too problematic. It's lacking any nuance whatsoever. Most of the characters are lacking any kind of likability at all. I just feel bad for all the people involved, honestly. I think it's just sad because I think that there were other ways that this movie could have been successful. Let me list a couple of them. You could have just filmed the stage show. I mean, that's something you could have done. You wouldn't have had the glamour and glitz of Hollywood and all these amazing A-list actors, but we've seen movies like Hamilton or Come From Away, and those are just filmed versions of the stage shows, and I think they are at the very least valuable as a historical document and highly enjoyable in their own right as individual works. So that's one thing you could have done for Dear Evan Hansen that might have salvaged this thing. But another thing, and I think the musical nerds will hate me for this, but I'm going to put this out there, you could have made Dear Evan Hansen the movie not a musical. And I honestly feel like that would have helped. Like, do away with all the musical numbers. Probably in that case, you wouldn't need Ben Platt. And just make this a psychological study of what it's like for this character to do these horrible things and live with that. Because with the musical numbers and Ben Platt looking like he is, it honestly feels really jumbled and kind of like this bizarre psychological thriller parody, as opposed to what it's supposed to be, which is a celebration of life and coming together. And I think you just need to get away from all that and just like make this just a straight up character study, quiet movie. It's not going to necessarily have all the actors that you have here, but I think it would be ultimately more successful instead of what we have here, which is just a mess. So those are a few thoughts as I'm left reflecting on this movie. It is a disaster. It's also tragic that all this effort went into this movie, and ultimately our memory of Dear Evan Hansen, a hugely successful Broadway show, is going to be shaped by this movie, and those memories will not be positive. And that's sad, but I hope that it kicks off some good conversations about mental health, which is what I think the filmmakers have already said they've desired to do. So at the end of the day, maybe it wasn't a total loss. All right, those are my thoughts on Dear Evan Hansen, the movie. What did you think of this movie? What did you think of the musical? Hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you think. If you enjoyed this video, hit like or subscribe. Make sure you hit that bell icon to get notifications. And a huge thanks to all my patrons at patreon.com/Dave Chen. Thanks to all my patrons for backing me and getting bonus audio content, bonus videos. Really appreciate all of you making my work possible. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.